Find your seats, we can get started. So welcome to the Wednesday, September 11th, 2013 meeting of the Planning and Transportation Commission meeting. Secretary Ulmer, please call the roll.
Commissioner Alchek, Vice Chair Keller, present. Commissioner King, present. Commissioner Martinez, Chair Michael, present. Commissioner Pinelli, present. Commissioner Tanaka, 5 present.
And do you have any announcements for us this evening?
I do. Both Commissioners Tanaka and Martinez said that they would not be available this evening, and our regular announcements is the next meeting will be September 25th. Agenda item 1 has been moved to the 25th. That's 2080 Channing Avenue. So we'll be hearing that item as well as the residential permit parking. That's it for this evening.
Okay, thank you. So the first portion of the meeting is oral communications, which is the time when members of the public may speak to any item not on the agenda, 3 minutes per speaker. Do we have any speaker cards for oral communications? Okay, hearing none, we can move right into the public hearing on the first matter, which is the only matter this evening, which is 2755 El Camino Real, a request by the Hayes Group on behalf of Pollock Financial Group, Inc. for initiation of a new planned community zone district and comprehensive plan land use designation to allow a new 4-story mixed-use building with 3 stories of below-grade parking on a 19,563 square foot lot. Can we begin with the staff report?
Yes, Chair Michael. Amy French, Chief Planning Official. I have with me here today Margaret Netto, who is the project planner and was around for the pre-screening and preliminary architecture review meetings on this proposed concept. I wanted to call your attention just first of all, we are trying an experiment with our staff reports leading with the commission purview. There was a bit of a discussion on, how do staff reports flow and what comes first. So you'll find a recommendation farther down in the staff report. So we want to make it clear that the purview of the commission tonight is the initiation of the planned community. There is also a request for a comprehensive plan land use designation or redesignation. Currently, the site is public facilities and was the VTA park and ride lot. So the project is a rezoning through the planned community process. First step in the formal process is a visit with the Planning and Transportation Commission. So we realize there are a number of items that you'll have questions on and want to discuss. I'm going to turn it over to Margaret to present the project. The applicant is also here to describe the development plans. And Margaret.
Good evening, Commissioners. The Planning and Transportation Commission is requested to consider the initiation of a new planned community zone district and comprehensive plan land use plan designation amendment for the property at 2755 El Camino Real, the former VTA park and ride lot. The project is a new 4-story office building of 31,776 square feet of a floor area of 1.62. Please note that this is an update from the staff report. 3 levels of underground parking facilities are also proposed. The parcel has a zoning designation of public facilities with associated comprehensive land use plan designation, major special facilities. On February 11th, the council conducted a preliminary review or pre-screening of the concept for the 4-story commercial development. And on May 2nd, the ARB conducted a preliminary review of the concept plans for the 4-story commercial project. The design was revised following council and ARB discussions. Council and ARB reviewed a 33,000 square foot commercial building with a 1.71 floor area ratio, The project is now proposed as $31,776. As proposed, the project features 3 levels of underground parking and vehicular access via right turn in and out of El Camino Real. The council gave initial feedback on components such as massing, architecture, public benefits, pedestrian and automobile improvements, parking, and several other components of the project. The proposed community benefits include land dedicationing and widening of Page Mill Road, upgrade pedestrian tunnel, installation of light poles on California Avenue, and installation of electric vehicle charging stations in all electric building, 10-year Eco Pass and Caltran Pass, VTA lot used for public use and urban amenities. The project concept proposes a maximum height of 50 feet above grade, generally consistent with the PF, CS, and PC zoning. The proposed roof screen would extend an additional 7 feet above the roof. There are, however, special height and daylight plane requirements for PC zone sites that abut residential PC property. Given this, the proposed building is over 35 feet in height and within 40 feet of a residential zone. A height daylight plane exception would be required. The subject property is also subject to special setbacks. The VTA site shows the easterly half of the site along Page Mill Road, subject to the 20-foot special setback. The adjacent property, the Silverwood Apartments, meets that 20-foot setback. The proposed project would encroach into the setback. Correspondence was received on September 5th from the adjacent property owner to the west, the Sunrise Assisted Living Planned Community Project. The property owner states that he is not in favor of this project being upzoned for office, given the adjacency of the Sunrise Assisted Living facility and residential property next door. He said that he had made a proposal for the office project on the Sunrise site before the Sunrise PC was submitted and was turned down by the city of Palo Alto, as he was told office was not more office space was not a use that they wanted to see here. The site was considered at the time, the site was considered a housing inventory site in the housing element. The applicant has met with Jeff Morris at Sunrise Assisted Living and also the board of directors of Silverwood. If the commission recommends initiation, this project would be subject to CEQA, and that's the California Environmental Quality Act. An environmental document would be prepared in accordance with CEQA following initiation of the plan of the PC. Staff recommends that the commission provide comment on the proposal and initiate the plan community request. Also, staff recommends that the commission provide direction and identify key issues for the applicant and staff to consider prior to the preparation of an environmental document and staff report for the design and for the architectural review board. And that concludes my staff report. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much. So before we ask the applicant to make a presentation, just for the record, noting this is a quasi-judicial matter, are there any disclosures to be made by any of our commissioners? So hearing none, at this point, and so I'm new in this role. I want to make sure that we've opened the public hearing. And I wanted to give the applicant time to make its presentation. And I think for this purpose, you have up to 15 minutes.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Ken Hayes with Hayes Group Architects, and I'm joined tonight by Jim Bear with Palo Alto Land Use, and together we'll be presenting the project on behalf of our client, Pollock Financial Group. I'd like to introduce the principals of Pollock Financial real quickly to you. We have Jim Pollock, we have Jeff Pollock, and we have Lincoln Westcott here in the audience tonight, and so they're excited about the project. Pollock Financial is an experienced developer, having completed many projects on the peninsula, including some projects in Palo Alto. And Hayes Group Architects has been around and done many projects in Palo Alto, including at least 12 on El Camino Real. We are very familiar with the El Camino Real guidelines, the South El Camino Real guidelines, the Grand Boulevard concept. We've been engaged on this project for about a year and a half, and we're looking forward to presenting it to you tonight. So thank you for allowing us. So the goals that we have for tonight's hearing are on the screen, and those are the same goals that we had when we went to the City Council. We had a pre-screening with them because the complexities with the project and because of all the issues surrounding what are opportunities for public benefit. And so we had a pre-screening with them. They commented on the architecture and on the public benefit. But the goals for tonight, as then, are to comment on the building design. And tonight we'll show you the changes sort of since we went to the City Council and the ARB. We'll show you that evolution. Review the parking requirement and the TDM with the TDM reduction that we're requesting. And then review the public benefits. I'll cover the first two, and then Jim will briefly cover the public benefits, but there's a lot to elaborate on there, so I would encourage you to ask lots of questions. I know you will, but Jim would be able to then elaborate on those at that time. We all know the site here on the corner of Oregon Expressway, El Camino Real. It's about 553 square feet. The surrounding zoning, we have the PC zone to the north, the Sunrise Senior Living. We have reached out to Jeff Morse. We have the PC Silverwood Condominium project next door to the east. We've met with their homeowners association and their building manager. And then the soccer facility across the street, Palo Alto Square, and then some smaller CN and CS development projects across the street across Oregon Expressway, where we have the AT&T store and some other projects. We in fact did the AT&T store. Current architectural evolution. So this was at the City Council pre-screening. We had this proposed project, and what we're responding to here were the El Camino Real guidelines, which really focused attention to this corner specifically and asked for buildings of taller height, building mass, buildings with lots of glass, signature type architecture on this critical corner. The comments that we got back from City Council, we listened, and what we heard was the building is too massive. It's too close to the corner. The corner massing needs to be set back. Are we able to reduce the height of the building? There's a public plaza that we were proposing on the north side of the building away from the traveled intersection. They didn't think that it was large enough and really not maybe usable. And then they asked us to soften the building more with warmer materials and so on. So when we went to the ARB, we had this version, which is radically different from what you just saw. We've pushed the fourth floor back. It's still a 50-foot building to there, but out here it's about 40 feet, 41 feet maybe. Comments that the ARB had were the recessed fourth floor is a good move. They were supportive of that, fit better with the district. They thought that the tenant entrance, which we show on the ground floor over here, should face the corner more and maybe address El Camino Real, like the El Camino Real guidelines suggest. We had a sawtooth pattern for solar mitigation along this sort of southeast side of the building. And they thought that we could still do that to mitigate solar, and I agree, but they thought maybe it made more sense to face the view. So we've actually flipped that to face the view, but we do have this serrated sawtooth edge that wraps the building now. And they thought it might be more interesting if it actually wrapped the corner. And so we've studied that, and you'll see the proposal tonight. They too thought the building entrance should be strengthened. They thought the planters, although they liked the planter as a buffer, they thought it was a little bit too tall. Maybe it should be more seat wall height. And then the chamfered corner should relate to the sawtooth form, as I just explained. The materials on this building are not unlike the materials that we're proposing today, but the building looks much more developed, I think, much more elegant given the comments that we got from them. The modifications are the sawtooth windows. We've actually reversed them, so now it flows around the corner. The geometry of that corner is more elegant, and it picks up the geometry of those sawtooth windows. The fourth floor is still stepped back. We have a terrace up there that'll be usable by a fourth floor cafeteria for the tenant. And the building is pushed back to create a larger sidewalk, 20 feet on El Camino, 11 feet on Oregon Expressway. We have this warm stone and metal cladding materials as well as high performance glass. The urban design features include a enhanced plaza, and I can show you that in a second. And then at the front entrance, we've pulled a canopy around, we've moved the entrance doors, and we have a address on the building there. This is the site plan. Oregon Expressway is here at the bottom. El Camino Real here to the north. The main entrance comes off of El Camino Real. All circulation comes in here, nothing along Oregon Expressway. You would enter here, park under the building here, or go down into the 3 levels of parking structure below. This is the public, or the open space plaza, if you will, that we have as a forecourt. We have 20 feet of sidewalk in front of the building to where the building mass is that you saw, and then another 13 feet to the front door. So we effectively have about 33 feet from the curb to the building wall on the first floor. The planters are enhanced as they wrap around the corner. We have a 4-foot planter here with a seat wall, 11-foot sidewalk on Oregon Expressway, and then trees that would kind of complete the urban design linkage along Oregon Expressway. We're proposing a water feature that we're still working on. Want your feedback on that. We think it would be a nice idea. And down here at this end, the ARB wanted us to find out a way to screen this transformer, and so we're proposing a vine wall around the transformer at the edge of the property. This is the building when viewed from across the street. You see the Silverwood condominium project here, our building with the 4th floor set back. Very elegant, very exposed on the ground floor to engage the street, and also provide some protection. The planter provides protection from feeling like the inhabitants are right on top of the street. So we like that feature. This is just a summary of the floor areas from the City Council study session or pre-screening. We were at 33,500. Margaret Netto mentions that in her report. The preliminary ARB, we took almost 2,000 square feet out of the building. For you tonight, we've taken another 2,000 square feet out of the building. From a parking standpoint, we have a 29,776 square foot building and a 2,000 square foot employee amenity that I mentioned on the 4th floor, which would be the cafeteria. So we're looking at a building that, from a zoning parking standpoint, is 29,776 square feet, which requires 119 parking stalls, which is indicated right here by this calculation. And we are providing 113 parking stalls vis-a-vis our TDM plan that we can get into detail on as you ask questions. But essentially, the TDM plan is really asking for a 5% TDM reduction of 6 stalls where 119 would otherwise be required. So we've kept inching that down to this point today. I think the next part here is for Jim, and he will comment on the easement, property dedication, and public benefits.
Leave that for me when you're done with the rest of your presentation. Or?
Okay, I am actually I'm done with it now. So.
Public benefit, and I'll try to be quick and allow you to ask questions of those that were too quick. The first constitutes 3 land dedications that we value, and these are, on all of these values, because this is an initiation only, we've got to be really rigorous with the level of backup and detail that we provide when we come to you for a recommendation in a first or second hearing after tonight's hearing. And we want to assure you that we will do that. We will be the first project that has done something that the staff and policymakers have asked but not been done before. The city is hiring an urban economist, applied development economics, who've worked for the city a number of times, to help look at the value of that is being created for us through the PC zone so that that's well understood. And the city is best able to analyze the value of what we're providing, but they want to look at how those work. That's always a question. Did we get enough? Did we give away too much? How does this work? And so we will be working with applied development economics. That will not refine what we present as values per public benefit. Those will be by much greater rigor and detail as we move through this process and get your comments and staff comments and all of that. In the 3 land dedications, do you want to go to the... There are 3 components. One of them is the widening of Page Mill, and that allows several alternatives that Jaime Rodriguez of Transportation Division has worked with the county on. And that is to either, initially it started as creating a dedicated right turn lane. The county in its interactions have said it might be more valuable to create deeper left turn pockets. You may recall that heading west, the left turn pocket, the first pocket's shallow, the second pocket is so shallow that 2 cars can't get in there. Either of those will be studied by the city and county and come up with the best transportation reduction and success through that corner, which is the worst corner in its performance in Palo Alto and the most heavily trafficked. The county will be doing work unrelated to our giving land on the southern side of the median. It's a terrible right turn lane at the AT&T building that Ken and I were involved with, but was not an issue that was asked at the time. And there are some ways in which the right turn lane works with the parking and all that is not successful. The county is doing that not because of our land dedication, but because of their control of the land in Page Mill, which is county managed.
Come back to this and go back to public benefits.
No, I'm doing public benefits right now. Let's go to the second one. The second is one that Carr and I have talked about without yet being persuasive. In the supplement that we provided, there was a description of these 3 land dedications, and this item was that it is unclear in the way that we all wish as city council members and planning commissioners and staff members that there's no dedication that says, and this specifically allows you the right to do all the subsurface work you ever want to do. And you have the utility, it's not worth showing the utility, there's several $1 million worth of underground utilities. What you would hate to have is us transfer the property to a bad guy who either said, grant me another project and this right is part of our public benefit, or don't dig your utilities. I mean, that conflict can just be avoided. We're going to make it a perpetual easement for whatever purpose the city wants to whatever depth. The city does not want easements because of hazardous materials and liabilities that don't happen with easements that do happen with fee. I'm sorry that I misspoke. And the last one is we are dedicating on our land, and this is not ever normally required, a 5-foot wide sidewalk in perpetuity on our land. Now, why that isn't required is because rights of ways are granted outside of a person's property. They've become owned or easements by the city or county for every property. So that this is the first time, because of our widening Page Mill, that the sidewalk needs to be on our fee. There's also 5 feet on the city land that we're giving them, but they want 5 feet on our property because there's an underground garage and all those complexities. But those are the 3 land dedications. We've put in $100,000 of allowance over what we identify as real costs right now, and that is Jaime Rodriguez has mentioned to me in more than just passing, but not in detail, that there will be some intersection changes and some street work that will not be provided by VTA, county, or Stanford Research Park impact fees. And we had not understood that before. We don't know what the details of that are, the number, but it's an allowance, and we will be rigorous when we return to you. Thank you. Upgrade the underground abandoned pedestrian tunnel is a partial VTA feature, but Hoover Elementary School used to be where the soccer fields are. And so for the elementary school, the city had dug a tunnel under El Camino to allow from roughly Sherman to cross through to the elementary school. It is a pedophile's daydream. It is steep stairs that are not to standards that any of us would like. It is really a dark, unlighted, dank, nasty 150-foot tunnel. We will panelize those with doors that the city can open when it wants in the future. But it needs to be made safe now. It is not safe now. Real quickly, the next is we were asked by Jaime to provide $750,000 to the California Avenue improvements because there were no pedestrian lights. There are intersection lights, but these are long intersections. Much wider the street separations than is true in the downtown, meaning you can have 250 feet between Birch Street and the next street. So without pedestrian lights, you don't get a comfort and a walkability. Electric vehicle charging stations along California Avenue, we are going to give the 2 parking garages and 1 behind Federal Express the 2 charging stations as engineered by the city at our cost.
So I see you're close to the end, so why don't you go ahead and finish?
Thank you very much. This is a significant one that requires only hooray as my explanation. This will be the first and a role model for Palo Alto of the first 100% electric building. There will be no gas. And this is because of the Palo Alto utilities now having 100% of its energy non-carbon emitting. Some of its hydropower doesn't count as renewable for water policy, but no carbon emitted. And this goes along with the approval by the City Council of a 20% target for reduced carbon emission. Well, you do that by getting your buildings electric as well as by changing your driving. So this is an all-electric building. A largest portion of the value that is an allowance only right now is it will be more for operating costs, and we can't pass that on to a tenant in full. So we will have a very smart, persuasive number when we come back. This is a plug number that may be somewhat less than that. It will not be greater. The next is half of the 10-year EcoPass and Caltrain Pass, $112,500, and those are very valuable in this corridor for trains and for the VTA buses along El Camino, along Page Mill. Urban design features that we will provide greater detail of when we return are trees, benches, things like that that cannot be compelled because they aren't on our property. And there's state law that says the city cannot impose improvement of city land in conjunction with approval of a project. So those would constitute public benefit, but we can't yet be persuasive about what they all mean. The VTA parking lot, while California Avenue is under construction, it will not have adequate parking. And so we will make our parking available, and the value was set by Jaime as much as by me, which is what do we pay per day for parking permits? We'll give you that, but we want you to give us the parking lot in September, October, until April when we need to start our underground work. And the final one is that I leave as an open issue for you. There are excess impact fees because we have a larger building. And so the question is, but we're being given a larger building and the impact fees are based on a per foot basis. Is that kind of overly aggressive to ask for any of that impact fee as part of the public benefit? And the answer is, if not, we come back with adjusted numbers that do or do not make use of any impact fees. That's it. If there are any questions, I'll certainly be glad to. Oh, I did want to make one comment. On Jeff Morris's letter, I was in contract to buy the property. I brought Jeff Morrison as my partner. I ran the PC zone. We were well received by the city with one office application, going to be complex, PC zone as is Sunrise. And Sunrise Assisted Living offered a 35 or 50-year triple net lease, so there would be no building a building, or so it was a wonderful economic return for Jeff. I'm no longer the partner there. But I ran the PC zone I was in contract and the controller of the land and did the PC zone for Sunrise Assisted Living. But it's incorrect to say that the city said, go pound sand for any office use there. Thank you very much.
So what I'd like to invite any members of the public who would like to speak on this matter to submit a speaker card to Secretary Elmer. Do we have any cards?
I don't have any yet.
Okay. So the process we like to follow on this matter is maybe coming back to the commission before having members of the public comment. Any clarifying questions that commissioners may have of the applicant or of staff, just take up to 5 minutes each in terms of asking any clarifying questions that you might have about this proposal. So, Commissioner Pinelli?
This is going to be directed to staff and to applicant. I'm a little confused by the FAR calculation. It says that the FAR for this project is 1.52, but that appears to be a FAR based on subtraction of
the 2,000 square feet of amenities.
Now, I can understand doing that for parking considerations, but why are we using that number?
So the correct FAR should be the 1.62 instead of...
was it 1.71? Or
That's when it was 33,000.
That's when it was 33,500. So
Okay.
as part of the request, it says 33,500 at 1.71. but the request is actually for $31,776.
Okay.
So that would put the FAR at 1.62.
Okay,
or
so
1.
that was just a mistake
Yeah.
in the document. Okay.
I'm going to be technical. 1804-030-65B defines those features that are excluded from gross floor area. So when an employee amenity area such as the cafeteria outside of the downtown, because it is a trip reducer, is excluded from FAR, it's not made up by the applicant by code for both parking and calculation of FAR. But your analysis is correct, and so is Margaret's. It's a bigger building than we're claiming because the 2,000 feet are exempted from being treated as FAR. So the size of the building, without the exclusion of the 2,000 feet, is 31,776 feet. When you exclude as FAR under PAMP, the code is 29,776, and we're indifferent to you're recognizing the level of FAR for policymaking. We do hope that, and the code provides for not requiring parking for those amenity spaces. Is that clear? Too much?
Too much. If I ask you what time it is, just tell me what time it is.
Thank you very
how
much.
the watch was made.
I'm sorry for my I'm sorry for my advocacy. Thank you.
Okay, and then the Caltrain and Echo passes, I thought those were being used for mitigation, for TDM.
We haven't prepared the environmental document, or this is part of their proposal rather than a mitigation at this point.
Okay, well, I guess for the applicant then, I'm a little confused. Are you proposing these to mitigate the need for parking, or are you proposing it as a public benefit above and beyond what you would need to do to get this project done?
We do not have a substantial traffic impact, as our traffic engineer Robert Eccles from Fair and Piers can demonstrate, partly because of the dedication of land in DePage Mill that greatly reduces trip generation over existing and future conforming uses. So we are not required for a CEQA mitigation, and we are not required a TDM plan with these passes even for the parking reduction. The TDM plan is sophisticated, and it asks for parking these shuttles, VTA and Echo passes, and we are doing those, though that is not what the 5% parking reduction is based on. It's other factors. Again, I yammer too much.
It's
I'm
other
sorry.
factors. Okay. Those are the only questions I have for the moment. I'll let my other fellow commissioners ask some questions.
Commissioner King?
Let's see. So I'll ask the applicant first a couple questions. So regarding the pedestrian tunnel proposal, so are you saying that you're going to do things to make it safe for non-use? This is not making the tunnel safe for use.
That's correct. It's a sad little chain link fence that's drawn across the top of the stairs rails. So you aren't supposed to enter down into that. But it is not with doors that shutter the tunnel, which is really a nasty, dark, dank tunnel. One alternative, when we look at what more would you want in public benefit, that the council wasn't wild about, and I'm not saying the planning commission shouldn't be, was, do you want us to fill the stairs and bring it up to grade and make a little tap dance plaza that could be very attractive and prevent people from walking down the stairs? Not that it couldn't be opened up in the future if that were the need, but it did not get high gravity, and I hope staff will agree that council didn't say that's a great idea. It was more like, well, if you've got limited value that you're going to put into public benefits, I'm not sure making that plaza level is significant, but we look forward to your comments.
Okay. The other question regarding the all-electric, was that, this is addressed to applicant as well, was that a request on the behalf of city staff or council that amenity be proposed, or was that on the part of the applicant to propose that?
An experienced and wanting to be successful applicant listens to staff, it listens to the newspaper, it listens to policymakers. This was not a direct ask by anyone. The applicant is offering this, and it's mildly complex because how do you value it? It's not, and electric dishwasher is not a lot more expensive than a gas dishwasher, and neither is the conduit rather than the gas line. The operating costs are more. But we were not asked to do this. We looked at it and said, and I will take pride in saying, if you're in this business of PC zones, you're in the leadership business as best you can. And so this was offered by us. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And then I would just make a sort of a general comment that, unless I'm mistaken, we were received at places tonight this flyer 2755 El Camino Real that had some updates and some fairly important information, updates to your proposed benefit calculations. And one, it doesn't really say who it's from. There's no cover letter. And most importantly for me, it's frustrating to me when things come from the applicant. I understand people, citizens write letters all the time last minute, and so those things I believe are appropriate to come here. But if people are either watching at home and are getting their information from the website, or in the future, if someone wanted to go back and see, oh, what was the information available at that meeting, that's not available to those people. So I get frustrated when these things are presented the night of the meeting.
If that's a PowerPoint presentation, I'll let Ken answer. If it's this document, which is called Supplement Number 1 to Version Number 1, and is dated...
it's not, just to sort of cut you off, but it's this one.
Because this was delivered 10 days ago.
Yes, and that was available, I believe, on the website. There is some. I have some frustration on my part that this is very hard to track. It's a complex project. It's very hard to track their updates, not all of them dated, and so it took a lot of work trying to sort together what was happening. The dedication were complex.
Regarding the document that you have in your hand, I apologize for the confusion. This is only a copy of the presentation we showed you tonight.
I understand. And it's important enough that, in general, I would believe this is something that the public would have access to. If they're watching on television or they would have a hard time seeing detail. And if they're looking on the web in the future, this won't be there, as far as I know, unless it gets...
I'll interject that we can go ahead and upload that in relationship to this project on our website.
Okay, please do. And let's see if I have. I would like to ask of staff. Let's see. So I was confused by your report refers to daylight plane height exceptions, and I think you addressed it verbally in your presentation, but I don't see in here anything graphical or that would help us understand exactly what those limits are. Am I missing something?
So the image on this screen is indicating a daylight plane requirements for a PC zone adjacent to residential PC. And do you want to describe that, Ken?
Yeah, this is actually a 1-to-1 daylight plane starting at 10 feet at the property line. Because of the Silverwood condominium PC zone, residential PC multifamily next door, the actual daylight plane is 1-to-2. So it's a shallower daylight plane. We're complying with the daylight plane that is generally accepted when we're dealing with RM40 properties and so on. So this is an exception to the PC ordinance that staff has indicated can be evaluated by the Planning Commission, City Council, and part of the PC zoning approval.
Okay, so that graphic shows compliance based on an exception. So really it's non-compliance. You're showing what the daylight plane is.
We're showing what it is, correct.
And that is not compliant with
correct.
The PC zoning.
Correct.
Okay. And
adjacent to a PC
residential.
with a residential. Right,
got it.
Use.
And is there some reason why we don't have a graphic showing what it should be? Normally I would see like you're showing where it is and then
we don't have that graphic. No,
okay.
we don't.
that would be helpful to see how far out of compliance you are. And so the daylight plane, there is no setback. The setback is part of that same graphic.
There is a setback of 10 feet, and we are compliant with the setback.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Alchek.
My questions are for staff. So first, is it appropriate tonight to be discussing and evaluating the proposed public benefits?
Yes, Cara Silver, Senior Assistant City Attorney. That is one of the factors that the Commission looks at when deciding on initiation, so it is appropriate.
Okay. Maybe staff can help me understand the second to last paragraph on page 8, because it's sort of snuck in there, and the city manager has directed that for a significant PC project such as this, the city should commission an independent third-party analysis of the potential scale and adequacy of the public benefits being proposed for the project, with a consideration for the public benefit and the provision for the full value to the city in exchange for the land use changes being requested. Such analysis would be required if the project moves forward. Is the city manager suggesting something different than what I thought or understood our role was in this process?
Well, in the past, the Commission and Council has not had a true economic pro forma study analyzing the value of the community benefits. So the city manager's direction to staff is to start to require those types of pro formas for all PC projects. The first pro forma that you will be seeing is in connection with the 395 Page Mill project, and we will also be performing one for this project.
Do you know if is this direction that was given also in the city council review when they reviewed this project, or?
Yes, the city council will also have access to that.
No, I mean, it was the city manager's direction, something suggested by the city. The reason I'm asking is because there's this, on page 15 we have community comments where a adjacent owner sort of suggests, before I get into that, Sunrise PC, what year was that?
I want to say 2001, 2003, perhaps.
Is the city have any recollection that there was sort of some negative, suggestion that office space was not welcome in that?
I do not have that recollection.
Okay. The reason why I mention this is because sort of the one comment we have suggests, inequity, if you will. But I think almost every property surrounding this property is a PC, if I'm not mistaken. Across the street, behind it, to the left, across the next street. And solar sort of strikes me as sort of an opportune environment to be looking at what all of those property owners were asked, or what they proposed as public benefits in relationship to, the public. You get what I'm saying? We have a number of properties there that exceed a lot of our limitations. What were those properties asked to provide as, by the way, of public benefits in terms of the analysis of the public benefits suggested here? I think to some extent we've been grappling the public benefits question, and I think I'm a little concerned with this idea that we would initiate this process. At what point in time would we get a third party to evaluate the public benefit question? Who sets the criteria for that? In light of the fact that we've sort of discussed how that criteria is actually very difficult to agree on. So this really threw me for a loop, because it makes it difficult to actually discuss this in this context, because it suggests that we need to ask somebody else.
Yes, Commissioner Alto, those are very good comments. This is a rather new policy, as I mentioned. We have not yet rolled it out completely on a project. We did do a very in-depth economic analysis in connection with the Stanford University Medical Center. That was a development agreement, not a PC, so it was slightly different, but the same concept. And when that project went through, there was an overall recognition that that economic analysis was very helpful to decision makers. And I think that the council has indicated that an economic analysis in connection with PC projects is a worthwhile task. The parameters of that economic analysis, I think, are still under review, and so it would be very appropriate at this time for the commission to weigh in on what factors should be looked at.
Is there, I guess I'd like to know what staff thinks about the notion of that analysis happening before this decision is made. What I mean to say is before we initiate and discuss whether the threshold has been met or what needs to happen in order for the threshold to meet, for us to review an analysis done by a third party so that informs the decision that we're making. I don't like the idea of holding up a project, but this sort of suggests that we're going to, what if we come back and the analysis is so different than the discussion we have? And that's my concern. I'm not sure how we're going to address that tonight, but okay, we'll come back to it.
Vice Chair Keller.
Thank you. So one of the things we've talked about is the idea that the benefits, public benefits in some sense, should be in some way commensurate, not equal, but commensurate with the benefit to the developer. So is of the increased development. So is that the kind of analysis that we would get input on from an expert, figuring out that so that we could evaluate the value of the public benefits in comparison to the value developer? Is that the intent here?
So again, this is an evolving process, and I think at this stage it would be most helpful to get input from you on what issues you think are the most important. But that type of analysis, I think, is certainly what the city manager is looking at.
Thank you. And a question for Jim Baer. And I'm not going to go into too much detail about the electric vehicle chargers. People expect me to talk about them anyway. But one of the things interesting is I think there's a mention in there about a level 3 charger. And one of the things is because because of the large power requirements for a level 3 charger, one of the reasons that it made sense to put one in when 101 Linton was being built is because since all the electrical work was being done, doing it at the same time, and similar for the Edgewood Plaza. So I'm wondering whether it makes sense to put the level 3 charger, the DC quick charge, on California Avenue where there would have to be bringing power and all that infrastructure, or whether it makes sense to put it on site where you're already doing a big infrastructure for the power. And I'm wondering your thought about that.
The request to put it on site, please go ahead with that with any specificity you choose. The issue that you raised on doing it for public garages in California Avenue, and level 3s are 2-hour charges, not 12-hour.
Right.
So they have high attraction. And they are not fungible in their plugging with other chargers. But so the issue that Arthur raises is a good one. We've walked with the electric utilities guys and looked at the transformers serving those light poles on parking garages, and it's not intense amount of energy being generated out of those transformers and not intense use. So the question does become, do you want 2 level 2s and we can't quite get a level 3 without putting in a whole new power system? Those are the issues that we hope that you will direct your staff to work with us on before we return. I just don't know enough, and impromptu statement would just be, we want to do it right and well and successfully with filling an important need, and we need more guidance from policymakers and from electric utility staff.
Thank you.
So I just have two questions at this point in our process. One actually relates to the information that the applicant has submitted about the traffic impact. And the building, as currently proposed, has 113 parking spaces, and there's an estimate of the number of peak hour trips being approximately 50, I believe. And as Mr. Baer stated, this intersection is probably the most heavily trafficked and the most heavily congested in the city. And I believe that there's a number of other potential projects in the pipeline that might have cumulative impact on this intersection. So I wonder if you can explain for us how the calculation works in terms of the traffic impact and the peak hour trips, number of people who will be parking there.
So in terms of the peak hour trips, Robert Eccles from Fair and Pierce, Senior Associate. So the number of trips that would be generated by the project is actually around 39 and 35 now. And that was partly because city staff directed us to take a look at how many trips were actually coming in and out of the parking lots. So we actually went out and did counts to find out how many trips were coming in and out. But basically, it's under 50. So that's the trips, and they come from all directions. So they're in all multiple lanes. We assumed about 50% of them would come down Oregon Expressway, so that's loaded up a little higher than the other directions. So in terms of the levels of service, and we looked at 3 different scenarios now. We looked at existing with the project. We looked at a near term, which actually included the trips that from the 395 Page Mill and from the Equinox development. So we added those into the roadway, so we looked at that condition. And then we looked at a cumulative where we actually got the 2035 forecasts from the company that's actually doing the new model update. So we did do 3 different scenarios with and without the project. And what we found in that analysis was that, again, the addition of the project kind of bumped up the average delay, which is how we determine level of service, by roughly a couple of seconds. And then what we saw when we looked at the right turn lane is that it actually pushed it back down to where there's actually a net benefit. So in the existing conditions, you actually reduce the delay at the intersection, this is for every vehicle there, by about 2 seconds on average, right? And so then when you go out to the future condition, like the cumulative, where by then the traffic is built up and the intersection is like level of service F, then what happens is actually by adding this right turn lane, you get a larger benefit, because as you reach worse levels of service, delay goes up exponentially. So if you do any improvement to reduce the traffic movement or improve traffic flow, then it actually brings down the delay quite a bit. And I know there's some interest in how this right turn lane, does it just help the right turn people, or does it help the intersection overall? It does help the intersection overall, because today, I live here in Palo Alto, so I drive through that intersection. You often will see people stopped in the right lane because someone is walking in the crosswalk, or there's a bus there. So as soon as that vehicle stops, it typically blocks the through movement there. So what happens with the right turn lane is that the right turners get out of the way of the through movements, so now more through traffic can go through. So again, that reduces the amount of time we have to give to that approach, and so other approaches can benefit. So the delay savings kind of is on several of the movement. It's not just the right turn movement.
Okay.
So I need any other, is there another? Did I get all the questions?
I think it's good for now, but don't go anywhere. And I just had one more question, and this relates to the analysis of public benefits that the Planning Commission is required to make, and maybe Mr. Baer would be the person who would respond to this, and that is that as you may know, earlier this year, the Commission made some effort to understand what level of analysis should be applied to public benefit in relationship to our recommendations regarding a PC zone application. And one of the things that comes up is a distinction in terms of benefits that may be intrinsic to the project and benefits conferred by the developer, which are extrinsic to the project. And we had the question of what exactly this meant and what difference it might make to the city. But I wonder if you could just maybe go over your list of public benefits, or just help clarify to what extent are the benefits that are proposed here intrinsic, and or which ones may be extrinsic.
I appreciate the question and want to point out that one council member in the study session, Councilmember Klein, raised the same question. Is some of this improvement of the intersection a private benefit? And Fair and Peers evaluate that to say you can get to the site from any direction at the level of traffic burden that it now has, that the right turn lane doesn't improve access or improve efficiency other than for the intersection, not for the project. I'm going to use that as the question of, is it intrinsic or extrinsic? And I'm sorry, I'm going to use my long past lawyering, but updated with land use. There were some seminal California cases, some to do with beach access, that said you cannot impose, as a condition of a project, improvements to public land or that are unrelated to the project's use of the site. And I will say that for the benefits we're proposing, other than perhaps the urban amenities that would be off-site, but that may not be imposed, but if there's a nice park bench and better trees and all that, that of course benefits the project and has an intrinsic value. But pretty much all the others, I think it's fair to say, are extrinsic in their value. The tunnel, I'm sorry, I don't have them in front of me. I mean, the California Avenue improvements, the improvement of Page Mill is of substantial improvement for the benefit of the public, with a very minor intrinsic aspect, which is if you're one of the drivers through that intersection, it improves it for you just as it does for the guy who works at Hewlett-Packard or Wilson-Sonsini, but not uniquely. I hope that's, I will respond more if you have a follow-on question.
I think that's fine for now. So before coming back to the Commission, at this point, we'd like to hear from the speakers from the public who've submitted cards, and if anyone else here who'd like to speak hasn't submitted a card, please feel free to do so.
The first speaker is Robert Moss, to be followed by Chris Donnelly.
Thank you, Chairman Maxwell and Commissioners. Well, what you have before you tonight is another typical PC scam. I'm not surprised that Jim Baer dropped last-minute changes so that the public couldn't see them. That's SOP for Jim on PCs. Let me tell you what you should be doing tonight. You should be rezoning the site so that it's consistent with the El Camino design guidelines, which, by the way, I helped to create. This project violates almost every aspect of that. So the site should be developed as CN, because one of the aspects of the El Camino design guidelines is you have CN zones adjacent to housing, and there's housing on both sides of this project. Second, you want to talk about public versus private benefits. Two of the public benefits which are listed are not public benefits. $400,000 for an all-electric benefit building isn't a public benefit, and the $112,500 for passes is something that a developer is required to do to give transit passes in order to justify reducing the number of parking spaces. I found it also very strange that in the staff report, the title says it's a 33,500 square foot building, commercial building. The first paragraph says it's 31,766, and in the document which was passed out tonight, it says it's 29,766. I suppose if we got two more submissions, we'd be down to about 25,000 square feet. So how big is this sucker? I'm going to assume it's 31,700, and I'll tell you what the public benefits and the private benefits are. The additional office space will bring in, at a modest rent of only $6 per square foot per month, $1.5 million more than would be allowed under CS zoning. So in 2.5 years, they've gotten back all the money they've identified for public benefits, and from there on, it's just gravy. So this project is classic. It's not giving us a real public benefit. It's going to have, and parking. The parking spaces that you require, it's not 4 per 100,000 square feet. It's closer to 7. So even if 20% of the people take transit, this project needs 180 parking spaces. It's grossly underparked. Finally, as you know, this is in the COE contaminated area, and a 3-level underground garage is absolutely unprecedented. When I told the water board about this, they were shocked. And I got a letter back from Roger Papler listing the many different mitigations that are required to keep people from occupying the building and literally being poisoned. Let me assure you, if a project like this was proposed in Mountain View, no underground parking would be allowed. So rezone it CN and bring it in under current zoning and kill the PC.
The next speaker is Chris Donnelly, to be followed by Deborah Italiano.
Good evening. My name is Chris Donnelly. I live on Pepper Avenue, which is just a block away from the proposed site. You may recall my presentation on the July 31st meeting about the horribly congested traffic and spillover parking problem we have in this neighborhood. Bringing such a huge project and cramming it in such a small space will only make this worse. I won't go into the numbers as the previous speaker did, but I concur it's underparked and it's overoccupied. And while we as a neighborhood feel that rezoning may be a good idea, we do not believe that cramming such a huge project into this site is a good idea. And really, occupancy and traffic and parking should all be looked at. In fact, I suggest that the project should be delayed until the EIR and the parking projects being done for the J-PAL project are complete, so we can see how this really affects the entire neighborhood, as well as taking into account all the cumulative projects that are going on, since I understand that typically that's not done. So we have grave concerns from a block away. We ask you to consider those. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Deborah Italiano.
Thank you, gentlemen. I'm a resident or an owner at Silverwood, just so you know, so that's from whence my comments come. There's a few issues that I see for proximity. When we're looking at the east facing of the building relative to Silverwood, it's not just the proximity relative to sunlight, and that of course has to be verified. But if you look, it's also the issue about cars and vehicles coming in and out past that building. It's going to basically be traffic by people's bedrooms and living rooms. So at minimum, they should be reconsidering where the driveway is. The other issue is regarding sunlight as well. The building faces much more south than I would have imagined. More south than Silverwood. And so it's not just how it hits the building, it's also how it blocks sunlight onto the courtyards at the front. So that also should be looked at in the investigation. The transformer is the third issue. I heard a little bit about it the last time there was discussion of covering it or making it look better. But if there could be consideration also for where that is. I understand it's right next to Silverwood, so that also is not wonderful to have that as your neighbor. And then there was discussion of Silverwood and Sunrise being consulted. If I don't know if it's listed here what the results of those discussions were, if there's content and descriptions about that. Thank you.
Thank you. So at this point, let's bring this back to the commission for any further comments you have, or actually this is your first opportunity to make your comments known about the proposal, and when appropriate, we can entertain a motion. 5 minutes each.
I have more questions before commenting, if I may.
Commissioner King?
Yeah. So, question of this could be of. Let's start with asking this of staff. So, the urban amenities proposed, are those on-site or are those off-site to the project? The public benefits of 150,000 of urban amenities, and if staff is uncertain, applicant can feel free.
I think the applicant would know what they're putting into that tally of numbers. I mean, they said earlier in their presentation that the street trees they were considering as part of the public benefit. So I don't know if those are being added in that number. You might see if the applicant can answer that.
Would the applicant care to address that? So my question is, the 150,000 of urban amenities addressed, are those on-site, off-site, a combination? And in the absence of the PC, how much would you have to spend in any event on those amenities, including landscaping?
Well, I think the amount that we spend needs to be confirmed. If it's a direction that we have support in, we will come back and have real specific detail on what that could be. On typical projects, it's very easy to spend $150,000, which is why we put that in as a placeholder at this point. But it would include enhancements of the public sidewalk, the additional trees, benches along the sidewalk, as well as public art.
So I guess my question is, we're being asked to consider this as part of the initiation. How much of that, I'm looking for incremental, so how much of that, even with an 8,000 square foot building that the current entitlement or the likely non-PC entitlements would allow, how much are you spending incrementally more than that, or that's would happen anyhow?
I would think that we'd be spending, we're spending incrementally more than that, because under a CN zone or a CS, if that was a CS, we would probably just have minimal walkways at the building and some on-site landscaping. So I think we would go above and beyond what would typically be considered sort of part of a CN project.
Okay, thank you. We'll consider that a work in progress at this point then. And I do have a question for the traffic consultant, if I may. So it appears that for instance, I'm looking at the peak morning trips, and I'm seeing 43 on one of the reports we were given. Can you confirm, is that incrementally above the current use, or that's?
Well, actually the 43 was before we took out a discount for the parking spaces. So the 43 would be the net new trips of the project. And then there's a small discount because there's like 7 or 8 trips coming.
Okay, got it. But in general, so the part I wasn't unable to find was the total trips. What does that show then as the total trips associated with the project in that morning peak hour?
Under the 43, that was basically the total trips minus a 2% transit discount that we get because it's on El Camino, which is 1 trip. And then there's also the TDM reduction, which is 2 trips in the peak hour. And so basically the 43 is really, in this case, because we treated it as an empty lot, that was the total trips.
Okay, and so I guess the 2 questions I have are, one, if I think, 110 employees in that building, how can there only be, and it would be shocking if they all carpooled and all fit in 3 people into 1 car, but I don't understand how you could possibly get 43 trips for 110 employees.
Because typically, and certainly in the Bay Area, people arrive over at least a 2-hour period.
Okay.
So remember that we're only studying 1 peak hour. So the trips are distributed over all the employee trips are distributed over the at least 2 hours in the Bay Area. it can be over
Okay,
3.
I understand. So I did not understand that. So 43 times the 2 peak hours is at least, and then my other question is, so then we call 7 to 9 peak, and certainly at least in Palo Alto, anyone who's ever tried to take Oregon Expressway east or west to El Camino would see peak that continues on through 10, 10:30.
Yeah. Well, in this case, we use the probably 8 to 9 time period because that would be high volume, and because the intersection is right at capacity, you don't get a whole lot more additional trips through there. So it's going to be, it may be level service D, let's say, in the morning, or E, and that may extend over a couple of periods, but we always are analyzing just the peak hour is what we report.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay.
And then another question for staff, which is, a member of the public stated that under TDM that there is a requirement to get the parking discount to provide passes, and that was in contrast to the applicant, and I thought maybe staff support that a TDM plan to meet the parking discount does not require passes, transit passes, to be paid for employees, that it merely requires a plan as evidenced in the 30 pages of documents we're showing here that are basically it's informational. It provides encouragement and information to employees, but not actual cost sharing of transportation.
Yes, just to weigh in on that, when somebody asks for a parking adjustment, there are, a variety of methods to get there. One is on-site employee amenities. Their cafeteria is one such. Then one of them is transportation and parking alternatives. TDM, with some options is listed in there, and for that they can ask for up to 20% reduction with TDM measures, but they're not defined which ones they must do. For instance, EcoPass is not even listed, in our table there.
Thank you.
If I could also chime in on that one, the community benefit of the EcoPass and the Go Pass is proposed for only a period of 10 years. The TDM programs that the applicant can apply for would be subject to the life of the project.
Okay, and well, the following would be, how do then we enforce that so for the life of the project? And if they said, hey, we're closing down the TDM, we're done, we don't like this, then what happens?
Well, they'd be in violation of the parking requirement.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Alcheck.
So every once in a while, someone asks me what I think of a 50-foot height limit. They want to know my opinion on it. And my response is, it's effective. I am not opposed to exceeding 50 feet. I believe that this process is not set up to deter 50 feet. It's my impression that the process is designed that when you want to exceed certain limitations, the city wants to be heavily involved, which is different than the city is blatantly discouraging 50 feet. I think it's a matter of perspective. We can't keep making exceptions to 50 feet and pretend like we don't permit 50 feet. We permit 50 feet in the context of some sort of coordinated, negotiation of public benefits. So I want to sort of suggest to my fellow members that I don't think neighborhood commercial is a suitable designation here. I don't think that this is a suitable site for a retail space, personal services, restaurants. I don't think it's appropriate. I don't think that entertaining the notion of a planned community at this site is objectionable, considering that every adjacent property is a PC. So the notion that we can't articulate a very specific solution for this site seems contrary to what this commission and the city has been involved in doing with all the adjacent sites. So simply on the basis of not liking a PC or not liking the PC process, I don't think justifies not entertaining this project. And I don't think that the alternative of I don't think the alternative zoning designations are suitable. You have the very unfortunate luck of proposing a PC after the last PC, which is essentially, building a police station in exchange for building something. And you can imagine how that skews our effort to evaluate what it is of the public benefit. The last guy that came in here asking to do whatever he wanted had to build, is proposing to build a police station on our behalf. You're suggesting that you're going to give us 5 feet of a sidewalk. You understand? It's like, I don't know if we need a third party to analyze how many square feet they're getting down the street and what the cost is for the police station, and then give me the cost per square foot. I don't need a third party to tell me, well, they're building this many square feet, so they should pay X. I don't know if I need that. But we definitely need more direction with this public benefit situation. I think that's what really bothers me about this process, because I don't know if I need more safety in what you described as a pedophile-friendly area, because I would assume that if there was a pedophile-prone area, that the Palo Alto Police Department is all over it. And so, when we had the police station discussion, we had the police tell us and inform us whether or not they felt this was the type of thing they needed. I think that it's important to appreciate that when we review this process, I don't scare easy, but it is an uncomfortable position to be in to suggest that I know what will benefit the public better than the public. And so without more direction from City Council as to what really we need, it's difficult to evaluate some of your suggested public benefits. Again, I don't believe that it is a valuable component here to determine how profitable a building will be in an effort to determine how much they should contribute. There is no developer who is not overly optimistic about the potential of his building to be successful. If they weren't insanely optimistic, they wouldn't be in the game, because it's a dangerous game. We don't know what's going to happen in 8 years or 5 years, and they may be sitting on an empty property, and the suggestions that they're going to be rolling in it will be irrelevant. I just want to mention one other thing that I'd like us to consider, which is that I think the 1979 El Camino guidelines are outdated. There's been discussion about there's drafts that the ARB has put forward, if I'm not mistaken. There's discussion about what those guidelines should now look like. I don't know if we should just assume that those apply here simply because they exist. And particularly because the PC gives you the flexibility to do what you want. I'm not sure that the other PC projects that are adjacent to this one comply with the El Camino Real design guidelines. So, to what extent should our analysis focus on how this site should be developed in a way that is compatible with the sites adjacent to it? The last thing I want us to kind of keep in mind, and I know I'm over, there's a discussion here about height and daylight planes, and there are already special height and daylight plane requirements for PC zones when they're adjacent to residential properties. I think that it would be valuable to us if we understood what this option of, here, for example, I believe it says here, shall be subject to a maximum height established by a daylight plane beginning at a height of 10 feet at the applicable side or rear sight line, increasing at a slope of 3 feet, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It'd be interesting to see what would this look like if it conformed to the existing PC requirements when they're adjacent to a residential PC zone, and what these applicants are asking? How are those different? So that, because to some extent we're talking about, okay, we could talk about a PC, and then now we're also talking about the idea of making exceptions to the already existing PC guidelines. So it's like further. And I think it would help to understand those, to visualize those differences, especially with respect to the concept of public benefits, because you would assume that if we were going to go even further than we normally do on a PC, then we'd want to be able to compare that. And finally, I made this point earlier, I'd really think that I would be informed by, I guess, a table that showed what all the PC zones that surround this, all the PC sites that surround this site, maybe if you choose a 500 feet radius, because there's a ton of them, what their public benefits were. Because until we have, in my opinion, to my fellow commissioners, until we have sort of a more tangible criteria to evaluate this, I think our evaluation should follow the evaluation we've applied in the past. So we should, to some extent, use the precedent of the neighbors and the other PC sites to evaluate what sort of contributions we would expect, until, I guess, we've been given more direction as to how they want to evaluate. That's it. I'm sorry for going over.
Commissioner Pinelli.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I first want to start out by saying that I think the PC process is meant to be a deliberate process. So my first suggestion right away is that we continue this item until, well, I would suggest not the next meeting, but the meeting after that at the earliest, to give enough time for the public to react or comment on what they've heard or read after the minutes are transcribed tonight.
So is this a motion, or just are you?
No, I'm not ready to make a motion yet, but I'm throwing that out there for my fellow commissioners to just think about in the back of their minds as I talk about some of the other comments, or as I share some of my other comments. I don't feel like I have enough information yet. And let me pick up on where Commissioner Alchek was talking about. One of the things I've seen the City of Austin, their planning commission or planning staff do really well is they've got this really nice idea of the building envelope. So what they do is they require their applicants to say, given all setbacks, daylight planes, height restrictions, et cetera, what does that envelope look like? And then take your project and overlay it with that, and let's see where the overlap or underlap is. Because there might be a good reason to say, well, we'll give you a little bit extra here if you take away, if you go in on the envelope over here. I think that would be very helpful in this case. I think it would help us understand what the real trade-offs are. So I'd like to see that when it comes back to us. When I think of public benefit, I don't think of it as the mitigation of the problems that your project is creating. And I think when I look at that list, some of them feel like they are intrinsic. Can't say that for certain, but that's my first instinct. I'd rather say that the public benefits are either something that enhances for the benefit of all, or helps to solve problems that already exist. And to me, the biggest problem with that intersection, your corner is part of it, but the real problem is pedestrian traffic trying to get across Page Mill, going north or south on El Camino, or west or east, however you want to describe it. That intersection is creating a heck of a lot of problems. Mr. Donnelly talked about, living on Pepper Avenue, and they have a lot, I know they have a lot of cut-through traffic, because I'm one of them. And the reason that there's so much cut-through traffic is that right turn lane on northbound El Camino to try to get onto eastbound Page Mill / Oregon Expressway, even when it's a green light for through traffic on El Camino, the right turn lanes cannot turn because they're waiting for pedestrians who come off the curb going north, and then by the time those pedestrians clear, you've got the pedestrians coming south who cross from the other side. And that's a similar problem that those people are going to have taking a right turn off of Page Mill onto El Camino. And what I'm concerned about is even with that dedicated right turn lane, there are going to be so many cars backed up that it's actually going to back up, fill up the right turn only lane and back up into the right-hand westbound Page Mill lane, unless we have a real solution for getting people across that stretch of El Camino. So we talk about a public benefit to address the non-use of a tunnel that exists. I'd rather see some creative solution from the applicant to figure out how to get people from one side to the other without blocking traffic going right from El Camino onto Page Mill or right from Page Mill onto El Camino. And that's what I'd like to see when this comes back. One thing that we haven't talked about a whole bunch yet, and there's an implication that this would be CS or CN, and I'd like to understand from staff, what would if we were not going to do a PC, if we were going to say, let's first figure out what this should be, and then determine let's determine that first, and then determine what the difference between that and a PC is. Why are we saying it's a CS? Can you give us some color there?
Much of the El Camino Real is zoned either CS or CN, commercial service, commercial neighborhood. There are some areas, Cal Ave in particular, and then as we get up to the town and country, that are CC, community commercial. So there's another commercial zone. There are some instances of non-commercial zones that are residential. And this site at one time was on our housing element for housing. So, at that time, it's no longer on our new certified housing element. So we wouldn't suggest a residential zone. So it's really those three. Now, with zoning, we try to, be similar to what's nearby. So across the street is CS. We just rezoned the 441 Page Mill site not too long ago to CS from R1. So that's a recent action. So staff would suggest CS as, the more appropriate. One of the speakers brought up, CN as appropriate next to residential. Again, we can look at, these are not residential zones technically, they are PC zones that have residential use. So we can certainly look at that. What is the density of the residential zones? They're not RM15, that's for sure. The Sunrise and the Silverwood, they're much denser than that. So usually the CN is an RM15 residential density.
Okay, thank you. So going back to this concept of public benefit, what I think we have to weigh as a commission is if this were CS or CN, which would the maximum, this project is exceeding that maximum far by how much? Can you just...
Yes, it's a 0.4 for the CS district.
Compared to the 1.5.
So it's effectively about 22,000 square feet of additional FAR beyond what would normally be allowed provision for.
4 times.
0.4 to 1.5.
Yeah, it's about 22,000 square feet. So the question is, that I think we have to ask ourselves is the problems or headaches associated with an additional 22,000 square feet or 3 point whatever times the intensity commensurate with the public benefit. And I've talked about this in the past before where what I'm really worried about is where we get one-time benefits for perpetual problems and perpetual benefits to the developer, let's face it. So I don't know how we reason through this. I'm not ready to make a decision tonight, and that's why I want us to think about continuing this to a date uncertain.
Commissioner Keller, Vice Chair Keller.
Thank you. So firstly, there seems to be two operative questions. The first operative question is, does this general use make sense at this location? We talked a little bit about that, and I think that what I've heard of my fellow commissioners is that this isn't necessarily a good site for retail. It's probably not a good site for housing, and that there's a question as to what promises were made when the Sunrise facility was put in, whether commercial would be allowed near here, and I'm going to defer that to be answered the next time. But forgetting about that question, the issue is what makes sense here, and this is a use that is potentially a reasonable use. I'm not sure if its intensity is appropriate at this location, but the use makes some sense. The intensity is a question that also needs to be addressed. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that if we agree that the use is appropriate at this location and the intensity is appropriate at this location, then the question is, are the public benefits appropriate for the PC project? Now, I understand Commissioner Olczyk's comment that says, I was driving 75 miles an hour down 101, and all those people speeding ahead of me, you didn't catch them, but you caught me. Why are you giving me a ticket when you didn't give those people a ticket? And that's my interpretation of Commissioner Olczyk's question. Basically, all those people sped down the road and gave minimal public benefits. Why do I have to give them? And I think the issue is because there's been significant complaint in the community about public benefits that turned out to be non-benefiting the public, or turned out to not really, maybe often they're private benefits, or they didn't materialize as real benefits. So there's a consensus that I think comes from council direction. I don't think it's merely from the city manager. I think it's council direction that we should evaluate the nature of the public benefits and consider that comparison with the value to the developer. Now, the question is, how do you compute the value to the developer? And I don't know anything as much about the nature of real estate economics as Commissioner Olczyk. After all, I'm a computer scientist. I don't buy and sell real estate. I don't develop. I'm an analyst. And so in that regard, what seems to me makes sense is from first principles, what you do is you figure out what the net present value is of the development under the allowable zoning. So if the allowable zoning, if we consider that as the CS zone or the CN zone, what could be built under that zone and what's the net present value of that benefit of that to the developer? Then you take the net present value of the development to the developer of the proposed development. And there's a delta there. There's some benefit to the developer of that. Now the question is, you don't expect the city to get 100% of that, otherwise there's no incentive to build, and there's also a risk factor. You don't expect the city to get 0% of it or to get a fixed amount. It should be some sort of, there should be some calculation there. And I don't feel qualified to make the calculation of what this difference is. And therefore, it seems to me that this is a situation in which a third-party expert reviewer, as a consultant to the city reviewing the project, can come up with what this net present value is to the developer and whether it's paid out, whether the benefit is paid in upfront or whether it's paid over a period of time, as a calculation we can do. And I'm happy with some of it paid up front and some of it over time, that however you do it is reasonable to consider. And remember that if it were CS or CN, there'd be ground floor retail. And that's also taken into account because it's 100% office, I understand. And therefore, the rent you get for the ground floor retail are less than the rent you would get from office being on ground floor. So that also needs to be taken into account with respect to net public benefit. So that's the basic calculation. If I may go into specific issues about public benefit comments. So I also consider myself an amateur traffic engineer, just like Commissioner Pinelli sometimes. and what seems to me is that I like the idea of the improvements done to the right turn lane on westbound Page Mill Road onto northbound El Camino. Probably also a big problem at this intersection is the thing that we missed, and I actually asked the city to do something about it, but there was nothing happening, and that was at where the AT&T building is. That right turn was not fixed when it could have been. There could have been an opportunity for dedicating that land to the city, but the city wasn't interested in Caltrans, and Caltrans, they didn't know what to do, so I think there's a missed opportunity. But I think there's an opportunity here to fix that. And the issue is that because of the scoop turn on the kitty corner from the proposed development with a pork chop island, there's actually land there. And what can happen is we can take this is kind of hard to describe, but we can realign the northbound median on El Camino Real and move it westward so that there are two left turn lanes. I think there's two over there, two left turn lanes, plus 3 through lanes, plus a dedicated right turn lane. By realigning the intersection in that way, we can improve it so that the right turners are not blocking the through people, and the through people are not blocking right on red turners. Now, I understand that there's an issue about pedestrians, but when traffic is flowing left in one direction, you can have a dedicated green arrow for the right turners in the other direction, and I would recommend that in both of these places. So there's a potential for that, and I think that would also significantly improve traffic over a period of time. It would also have the benefit of reducing the cut-through traffic on Pepper Avenue and Olive Avenue.
So I have a question on that. Is that something that would be within the discretion of this applicant, or is that just sort of a general thought?
Well, I think that to the extent that this applicant wished to propose providing funding for the city working with Caltrans to realign that intersection, that could be a public benefit, just as is being done here, that can be considered. And I think it's not necessarily it's proximate, but it's actually it is a public benefit for which funding can be provided to do that, because there would be a cost involved in the realignment. So I want that to be considered. Another thing to be considered is, as I mentioned, the issue is it's going to be a lot cheaper and more cost-effective to put the DC quick charge, or sometimes called level 3 charger, on site with no cost for install or use, as comparison to putting it on California Avenue. It's easier to put level 2 charger on California Avenue because the infrastructure requirements are a lot lower, so that makes sense. In terms of the all-electric building, it sort of reminds me of the old all-electric kitchen idea people had. But the issue is that you get lead points and lead benefits, presumably, for having an all-electric building, I presume. So in some sense, that is, to some extent, a private benefit. There's also the consideration that there may be a cachet for renters to rent in a space that is all-electric. And if you do the appropriate insulation and whatever, the cost may not be that much greater than that in terms of HVAC and such. I don't know if there's a photovoltaics you're putting on the roof that can also mitigate the cost of the electricity. In terms of the EcoPass and Caltrain, I think that does to some extent fit in the TDM measure. The question is the extent to which the TDM for that is already covered by other things, the extent to which you actually exceed the TDM requirements because of our 4 per 1,000 parking requirement. On the other hand, we understand that occupancy, especially for a lot of buildings, is increasing below more than 4 per thousand, and therefore there would be an increased need for parking. So to the extent that we have that EcoPass and Caltrain, that would mitigate in an informal sense the increased parking demand that we'll realize from increased occupancy. And unfortunately, we don't have a way of capturing that in our zoning ordinance yet. And the final thing is PC zone excess impact fees. Well, the impact fees by law are mitigations for impacts, and therefore they're not public benefits. Those are impact fees. Thank you.
So thank you for that. So in my brand new role as Commission Chair, I'm discovering one of the personal benefits is getting to speak last. At which point many of the thoughts that I might have expressed have been masterfully covered by colleagues. Just to clarify terminology, I think one of the questions that's coming up is whether something is beneficial to the public or to the project, or whether it's intrinsic or extrinsic. And I think what I believe is meant by an intrinsic benefit is something which meets a need or a desire of the public. This might be for affordable housing, it might be for open space or landscaping, it might be for neighborhood serving retail, it might be public art, but it might be something inherent in the building itself which fulfills one of these needs, which has been expressed perhaps in the comprehensive plan or otherwise is an objective that should be met by the public. An extrinsic benefit, as opposed to a developer creating a building that has affordable housing, might be something which is beneficial, but it takes a form outside of the project. It might be payment into a parking fund, it might be funding for needed infrastructure, it might be something sort of outside the four corners of the project. And you do have, I think, a mixture of those two things. And then there are things which are benefits to the project. And we're not thinking that that's intrinsic. Intrinsic is something which meets this public need. So just terminology there. A concern that I think has been expressed by the Commission and picked up by the public is that there's some significant long-range planning efforts underway with the city. In this area, there's the California Avenue Fries area concept plan. There's the update of the city's comprehensive plan. And I think both of these long-term planning efforts have involved substantial effort and are actually in their final stages. And it raises for me the question of whether, as we have this surge of economic recovery and development activity and proposals which are coming forward, some of which are quite interesting and maybe very exciting, should they be approved on a project basis, ad hoc, if you will, or is this something which is best done in relationship to clear principles and the vision of the city, the specific context that might be provided by the neighborhood plan or by the applicable parts of the comprehensive plan? So almost a question of, we're in this home stretch relative to some of these significant planning efforts. Should we maybe be cautious about jumping the gun on things that might not otherwise be consistent in fulfilling those principles and those visions? And I think in particular, this one location, this one intersection highlights the dangers of cumulative impact. At some point, there's going to be the one building too many. It's just that all traffic will sort of come to a screeching halt, and life as we know it will sort of be, altered. And I don't think this project is that project, but I think that the city council, everybody needs to be highly cognizant of that as we move forward, and when and if this project is approved, it comprises part of that cumulative development impact. So I think our process and the piece that is held by the Planning Commission should be consistent and predictable. I think we should be objective and we should be analytical, and we should make a decision based not only on the rules as they apply to us, but also on the relevant data. And as I've heard from my colleagues, I'm not sure we have enough data to initiate this project this evening, although we may have that in short order. In particular, I guess over and above the requests for additional information made by my colleagues, I believe this new process which council and the city manager have undertaken to begin could be and maybe should be applied to this project relative to getting an independent, objective report on the economics of the public benefit as applied to our initiating the PC. I would imagine that that's not terribly time-consuming, but we haven't done it before. Maybe a question for staff: do we have a sense of what would be involved if we continue this matter to either a date certain or a date uncertain, with a request that we come back with that report?
I think it would probably take 4 to 6 weeks to get that report to you.
Okay. Well, I think those were my main concerns. I think that the commission often is very interested in any comments from neighbors. We did get a written letter from Mr. Morris. Unfortunately, he was not here this evening. If the matter is continued to a subsequent date, perhaps he would have the opportunity to make his comments known above and beyond what he submitted in writing. But those were my main questions. Maybe at this point from the commission, if someone would like to make a motion. Commissioner King.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have a question for staff regarding the process. So my understanding now from the staff report is that if we were to take a vote and choose to not initiate the PC, that the applicant has a path that they can go appeal that to the city council. Can you, one, confirm that, and two, confirm the timing on that? My goal would be, in the instance, I fully respect for the applicant that their clock is ticking. They have money out. They're spending a lot of money waiting. And so they might choose to say, to have us vote, even if vote no, maybe a better answer to them, and then have them appeal it to council. So I would like to throw that out for discussion and ask the staff of the process.
Technically, it would not be an appeal. It's a legislative request. The continuance is not unheard of an initiation. You've done it several times. Most recently for the 395 Page Mill project, you did continue your consideration of an initiation. And having said that, yes, if you did continue it, the applicant could request consideration by council. I think the better choice would be to come back with data and information for your continued consideration of initiation, because you may want to initiate the project after you receive additional information.
Well, let me just kind of weigh in. So it's my understanding that the council very much appreciates the diligence of the Planning Commission in raising various questions and in working with the applicant and the community, providing a forum to bring out all the relevant information. And I believe that the comments made by my colleagues on the commission are all directed at information that would be relevant either for us or for council. And we would hope that if we do have a motion and a vote that results in continuing the matter, that it be continued to a matter that's a date that's very soon, and that we fulfill our job of building a complete record of the relevant information that would facilitate prompt action by the council based on whatever recommendation that we would make.
So, and I'd like to ask this both of staff and the commission. I almost wonder if we should make a motion to initiate this process, while at the same time suggesting that the applicant hasn't overwhelmed us with or demonstrated that the project proposed meets the criteria that would result in a decision by this commission to approve that initiation. And if we come back at the next meeting and we still feel that way, we can at that point continue it and give them a third opportunity, or we can suggest we don't think you've met the criteria. And the reason why I sort of feel like that's the better approach is because it's ultimately the same approach. And frankly, I think there's a lot of work that still needs to be done, and there's a lot of discussion that still needs to be done. But I think that the community will show up, potentially more sincerely, if they think that we're really evaluating it. I'm really just concerned with the notion that it's sort of surprising we don't have anybody here from Sunrise. You know, it's surprising we don't have any, I mean, with two speakers here that are, neighbors. So I don't think any of us would be comfortable approving this project as is. I don't think that we can't, I don't see really the difference, to be honest.
Vice Chair Keller.
So quickly, there's a big difference between initiating tonight and continuing and rejecting the project. If we reject it, then the process is for the applicant to go to council, and that basically is automatic in some sense, because if the applicant wants to build a project, the only way to do that is to get the council to initiate the PC zone. That's number one. Number two is that if we initiate tonight, this project in general will not come back to us until we are actually dealing with a completely fleshed out, completely designed project with a complete set of public benefits, which we can then accept or reject some months or years from now. It is only in the extraordinary project do we get a point in time to get a midpoint analysis of it between when we initiate and when we deal with the completed PC ordinance, complete design, and everything done. So my sense of the third thing is that if we continue it, we get the opportunity to gather more information, and we have the opportunity to give clearer direction to the applicant, which I don't think we've done that much now, so that when we initiate the PC zone, excuse me, if and when we initiate the PC zone, we have given clear direction to the applicant, so the applicant can then go off and do the design work, and when it comes back to us, it's hopefully in consonance with what we recommended. But we have not given clear recommendations now, and I think that the record is incomplete in terms of what is needed. So I'm going to basically make the motion that we continue this item to a date uncertain, with the request that staff expeditiously obtain the information needed so that this can come back to us as soon as possible without an undue delay.
I'm going to second that.
There's a motion by Vice Chair Keller, seconded by Commissioner Pinelli. Vice Chair Keller, do you have anything further you'd like to say about your motion?
Just very quickly, I'd like to expand slightly on what Commissioner Pinelli said. So if you think about this, the building envelope that you're allowed to build under existing zoning, there's the building envelope that you're allowed to build under standard PC zoning, and then there's the building envelope that's being created in terms of the exceptions to that PC zoning. And I think we need to understand how this project relates to all three. Thank you.
Commissioner Pinelli.
Like I mentioned before, I think a continuance is warranted, and I think I've mentioned this before, that I think in every case where an applicant brings a request to initiate a PC, that we should almost automatically continue it, because I think that we need, first of all, we need to give a little bit of time for the applicant to address our questions and concerns, but also time for the public to comment and react to what's been discussed here today. I agree with my fellow commissioners, though, and I think we've all said it, that we'd like to see this done as expeditiously as possible. So we're saying a date uncertain, but hopefully that date uncertain will be sometime in the next 6 weeks, let's say. That's all I have.
Commissioner Alto.
So I'd like to propose a friendly amendment. First, if it's going to be a 3-meeting process, then we might as well just call it a 3-meeting process. That's sort of what I'm getting at. If we're going to automatically continue every PC thing, then let's just call it what it is. That's all I'm suggesting. But I appreciate your comments. Actually, agree with you've convinced me. I think we should continue it. I'm not suggesting we don't continue it and initiate. But what I would like to suggest is a friendly amendment that we don't see this again until we have the quote-unquote city manager directed financial analysis. I don't think, based on what you've just argued, it doesn't make sense for us to have a discussion about public benefits that will ultimately lead to a final package presented without having a review of the pro forma, which I don't want to suggest I love that idea at all, but if that's going to be the way we do it, it seems contrary to the position you just stated that we would get that financial analysis at the third and final time we review this, at which point changes will be very difficult to make.
So is that friendly amendment acceptable to the maker of the motion?
So I'm wondering if what staff feels about the idea of at least getting a preliminary analysis of the nature of the financial comparison of the public benefit with the benefit to the developer, and what time frame for that would be?
Yes, I stated that I thought it would be 4 to 6 weeks.
Okay, so then in that case, I'm happy to accept the amendment.
As I.
Let's see.
Commissioner King.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. So I'm going to, I may be bending things a bit here, but I want to, since I haven't really, I think it's positive to give information to the applicant about where we are, and I haven't really done that. So I'm going to, in supporting the continuance, just address a bit. Let's see. So the crux of this is really the public benefit. Without public benefits, it's an 8,000 square foot entitlement is the way I see it. And you've got the list of numeric public benefits, and some might argue, I think at the council study session there was a discussion of it's a gateway building, and so maybe, in my mind, I don't consider that intrinsic benefit significant enough to create a PC. So for me, it's really about these costs. And as far as the other thing, I like to do some form of rough analysis. And I know we've had a developer that said, oh, we don't like back of the envelope, but I've done my back of the envelope calculations. And so if we're saying there's roughly an 8,000 square foot entitlement now, and that we're going to have 32,000 because that 2,000 of amenity is leasable space, even if it's not countable towards FARs, we're looking at about 24,000 square feet of upgraded entitlement. And I'm just using a number. I'm happy for someone to correct me, disabuse me of this being a reasonable number of profit of maybe $500 a square foot. Maybe it's 300, maybe it's 700, but I would guess it's somewhere in that range. And so that's roughly $12 million, maybe 8 to 15 is what I would see as a potential benefit to the applicants. And so if in fact that's the public benefits don't seem to be commensurate to me with the potential profit. And again, I'm really anxious and excited to see the third-party analysis to see how far those numbers are off. And then regarding the amenities, so regarding the impact fees, trying to count those, I consider that, I personally believe that to be insincere, and whether it's PC, not PC, putting that on there just doesn't, to me, engender trust about the process and counting the numbers. The use of the VTA, will benefit somebody, I assume. That's great. That's fairly de minimis. The urban design features, again, we're unclear as to whether that's really double counting what might be required for the project anyhow. The passes, further discussion. The all-electric, I would hesitate to count that. I don't think we have a policy or even a discussion as a city as to the benefits of all-electric and where that should be appropriately applied. So I discount that one. And then the electrical vehicle charging, the lights installation, and the upgrade. I personally consider those that's zoning for sale. It's really not related to the project. It's the applicant giving the city money to purchase things that the city should well be able to do on their own, in my mind. And then the real public, to me, the key public benefit, if we look at the downstream cumulative effects of the traffic, if you looked at those numbers, if the 2035 numbers are accurate, the changes to the intersection are a material benefit. And I think Commissioner Keller addressed the fact that we missed a potential opportunity, although I don't think it was PC, for the parcel across the street to improve that right turn lane there, which would have been a significant public benefit. So I think we have this opportunity now. So this is to me, this is the real benefit. How we value that, I think, is challenging. For the applicant, other than some hard costs, and they haven't addressed how much of this is hard costs versus land value, if the entitlements don't change with them doing the land dedication and the widening, then there's really zero cost to them. They've paid for the parcel, they're getting their same entitlements, and so there really isn't a cost to them other than hard costs and any legal costs. So in my mind, if someone were to come to me and say, "Oh, what would we do in this for this parcel?" I look at the existing entitlements, and then I would look at what are the costs of the applicant. Let's use their $600,000 that they're proposing on item 1, and then I use $500 a square foot profit. So really, it would upgrade 1,200 square feet, and maybe that should be larger for the entrepreneurial risk that they're taking. But I come up with then a project more in the 10,000 square feet range than 30,000 square feet, based on what I perceive as the current public benefits. So thank you.
So I want to give the applicant time to respond to some of the things that you've heard in the comments and the questions from the commission before we take a vote on the motion. And I believe if you'd like to respond in any way, let's give you 3 minutes.
Thank you for your comments, and I hope I'll leave a minute for Ken if he would like to speak. It's hard not to say one thing and have it come off as arrogant, and perhaps it is. I've done 25 planned community zones in my long career, which is nearing an end, and they've not been disapproved. I'm saying that to say we really try. It's not backslapping or anything. We really try to be in touch with policy. And we were given by previous director Curtis Williams a dollar value as the goal based on 101 Lytton, which is a project I was involved with, saying you've got to be at least this many dollars per square foot of public benefit. I'm not going to give you that number tonight, although we've exceeded substantially in this. But I do understand and appreciate that the most significant partially intrinsic, partially extrinsic benefit is to really fix up that intersection. And if that includes figuring out and being able to have a conversation to better understand the pedestrian movements that hold up traffic, to better understand the pork chop, to better understand all those features, we get that has the opportunity to be the most valuable. Now, Commissioner King, I would like to caution the strength of your thought that it's what it costs you to give land away that you've already purchased. It's not the value of that to the public as benefit. And I hope we can discuss that openly later. And of course, your notion of I appreciate your saying there's some X value of increased gross value, and we do need to look at what the costs of creating that value are so that we look at a net value, and we will do that rigorously when we return. It's an expensive site, and it's very expensive to mitigate the COE plume for the underground parking. It's an expensive building, but we will do that. Your approach to even start by saying it's really the net value after your costs to do the building that we want to look at. I appreciate that very much. Thank you all for your diligence. These are never easy. Oftentimes the public hearings are not happy, with or without extensive public comment. And we learned a lot. We learned more than you may have thought by experience and listening. And I hope you will allow, without it seeming as if it's advocacy, some opportunity to meet with you before our next hearing, just to hear and understand what is the issue of pedestrian movement. What are some of the other features? And you'll discount those things that are harsh advocacy by me and the applicant or Ken Hayes, and you will find some value in the questions we ask. So thank you very much tonight. I think we learned much more than you may have grasped, even without there being precision and emotion saying X, Y, and Z. I think we got a lot of very valuable information. We appreciate your time. We will return with a project that you will be proud to initiate. Thank you very much.
You don't have to reset it, but I would like to say thank you for your time tonight, and to point out that I do think that this corner is a critical gateway corner. I mean, it's the most probably traveled intersection in Silicon Valley. It's the gateway to Stanford Research Park. It's the gateway to Palo Alto. It's a very recognizable site, and I think an opportunity to do something great for that property and to kind of anchor it. I want to point out that this building is not a large building at 31,700 square feet for that corridor. And if the building had housing in it, and that's not what we're proposing, it's not what staff is recommending or anything, but under the PC ordinance that we're talking about, we would be allowed the 50-foot height limit, and if it had 60% residential, and we would be allowed to have the daylight plane that we're showing today at that 45 degree. For some reason, the ordinance is written in such a way that if you don't have housing, you have a more restrictive daylight plane and building height, which is rather confusing. So if the building had 60% housing, we could have 50 feet in height and a 45 degree daylight plane, which is what we're showing tonight, because we think the site does deserve a taller building, larger mass, and be more consistent with the outdated El Camino Real guidelines. So I just want you to kind of put that in your framework. Thank you very much tonight. Appreciate your comments.
So thank you very much. Just before we vote, I just want to note that I think we may be breaking new ground here in terms of trying to introduce an additional step in our analysis of the PC zone. I believe this is something that is consistent with the policy set by the council and the expectations of the community. It will probably take some additional time as we get into our learning of how to do this process expeditiously, but hopefully it won't impose undue delay. And there has been a lot of public comment and coverage in the media even about whether or not new buildings in Palo Alto are attractive or not. And I would just like to comment that my review of the material submitted by the applicant suggests that there's a pretty good faith effort to make a very attractive project at this site. And other than the fact that I think that there's insufficient information for us to do our job this evening, but with the expectation that we will have that information quite promptly, I think that the level of thought and design and attention to good land use is something that is evident in what we've seen tonight.
This has been lost tonight. We do have a model over here if you have a chance to look at it.
Okay, thank you very much. And with that,
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Patelli.
I just want to quickly expound on my acceptance of the friendly amendment from Commissioner Alczek. And I want to make sure that this is heard loud and clear by the applicant. Even though a dollar is a dollar, $1 million spent for a public benefit, say, on a piece of art for the city versus $1 million spent to solve a major problem that Mr. Donnelly and his neighbors and Ms. Italiano and her neighbors are suffering or might suffer. I would say that $1 million, you can't just take the face value of $3 million, and it depends how that money is spent. And so we shouldn't just consider the cost when we do this analysis, but actually the value of the expenditure investment.
So with that, let's have a vote on the motion. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. 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 So the vote is 5 in favor, with Commissioners Martinez and Tanaka absent. Thank you very much. And
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And we'll close the public hearing and take a 10-minute break. And on the agenda, the next item is minutes approval for the meeting of August 28th, 2013.
I move that the minutes be approved as amended.
I second.
Okay, any comments? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. That passes unanimously with Commissioners Martinez and Tanaka absent.
You need to say who made the motion and who seconded it.
Oh, a motion made by Vice Chair Keller, seconded by Commissioner Pinelli. Next item is the Director's Report. Ms. French?
In lieu of the director or the interim director, and on that first note, segue, we do have a new director, which you may have noticed on our website. News flash, Hillary Gittleman from Napa County. We were lucky enough to have her accept our offer, and she is anticipated to be coming here on Monday for the confirmation by council for her position, council-appointed position, and then would begin in October. So you'll have a chance to meet her, and you could come if you wanted to Chambers to see her in person on Monday. Second thing is that in addition to what's reflected as what's coming to you on September 25th, the Edgewood Plaza Shopping Center supplemental EIR and the residential permit parking noted there on the agenda. We also will be bringing to you some draft ordinance language about the code sections relating to parking exemptions and an interim ordinance. So we will be seeing that in the newspaper, the publication of the wording of what you're going to be seeing in the way of modifications to the code that will come to you on September 25th. Did you have any other? That's about all I have.
Well, thank you very much. So just, does that include any commission, staff announcements, updates, reports, and comments? You've addressed all that?
That's our stuff.
It was just the director's report. Okay.
Okay.
We do official reports.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So our next item would be commission reports from our representation of the City Council and our subcommittee and liaison representatives. So maybe Vice Chair Keller, you representing us to the Council in September.
Thank you. So I went to the meeting on the City Council on September 9th. There were 3 items that may be of interest to the Commission, one more directly, two of decreasing interest. One is that the project at 240 Hamilton, which is opposite City Hall, opposite on Ramona, I guess, the other side of Ramona from City Hall, was pulled from the consent calendar. There was an appeal of the approval of the architectural review, and that was pulled. And I'm not sure when it will be scheduled for. I think it was a date uncertain, I believe. Something that people may be interested in is, because actually it's relevant to our one of our comp plan things we said, which relates to Palo Alto Green. The residential Palo Alto Green program is now suspended. The commercial reduced in cost from 1.5 cents per kilowatt hour to 0.2 cents per kilowatt hour. It's being retained because people in some businesses get green points and lead elements and whatever for having 100% renewable. So that pays for getting solar to replace the hydropower that we have in the city. There is some reserves in Palo Alto Green, so there's going to be a report coming back figuring out how to spend that reserves because it's no longer needed for that purpose. And then there's going to be design work on a Palo Alto Green type program for the natural gas supply, because that's the next thing that is has greenhouse gas impacts. And the third thing, which may be interesting people, is there was a proposal vetted by, I guess, the Library Commission Library Advisory Commission, to rename Main Library to the Rinconada Library. And the reason it was named that is because the main library is no longer the library that is the biggest, nor is it the library in which administrative functions are, because those are being moved to Mitchell Park. However, the proposal, and I'm not sure exactly how it's worded, but essentially the proposal is to consider a dead person important to Palo Alto history.
Deceased.
Deceased, okay. Name it after somebody deceased important to Palo Alto history, to consider that, and that will be done, I think, going to Policy and Services, if I remember correctly. And they have the option of keeping the name Main Library, going with Rinconada after all, or finding somebody useful. And the observation is that we're so good at finding people who are deceased to name things after that Heritage Park is called that. So anyway, thank you.
So next we've got the opportunity for reports from other liaisons or committee representatives. And before we do this, at the pre-commission meeting, we had a brief discussion as to whether we should update this list insofar as certain of the tasks that were organized in the past have been completed. And I think one of the items that I'd like to put on the agenda of a future meeting would be a PTC study session where we would be able to discuss at our meeting our priorities, and to the extent that we have a clear sense of what our priorities are, to what extent we want to organize subcommittees to perform any functions that would assist in our achieving our priorities. And in that regard, I'd be curious if where we have a committee or a subcommittee, that we have a clear sense of what's expected, what we want the committee to do, what it's authorized or empowered to do, if it even has a charter, so to speak, so that when the subcommittee is successful in achieving that, then we know what success looks like, and everybody's expectations are set in advance and fully satisfied when we're done. So as far as I see when I go down the list, the Regional Housing Mandate Committee liaison has been me for the past period of time. I'll continue for the time being. That committee's meeting tomorrow at 4 to consider the residential density bonus ordinance, and I'll report back to you on that. I think Eduardo Martinez, who's not here tonight, has been ARB liaison, and that certainly makes sense given his credentials as an architect and his experience here. Transportation with Vice Chair Keller and Commissioner Tanaka has maybe been duplicated to some extent with the work that as a comp plan subcommittee on the transportation element. So whether it's important to maintain the transportation committee separately from the transportation element work that's just about completed, maybe we could look at that. And I think that the amendment process for the comprehensive plan is shortly going to be going to council for their work, during which time it may be important for the PTC to be a resource to council in terms of understanding the work that's been done at our level together with staff, and if they have questions, if there's something that we can do to facilitate their process for understanding and ultimately approving the amendment. I think we should continue to have a subcommittee that has that capability, and I think it would be appropriate for Eduardo Martinez to be the leader of that. And since he's not here tonight, we can assign him all the big jobs. But we can look and see what components go into that. There are no number of elements still in process, and we can sort of retain that as it's currently organized. The CIP infrastructure work that we do when the city goes through its process for updating the capital improvements is it program, plan? The P, what's the P in CIP? Program. Gets activated later in the year when that information comes to us. In the meantime, the council has an infrastructure committee, and I was there's a number of us who are alumni of the Infrastructure Blue Ribbon Commission, Commissioner Pinelli, Tanaka, and myself, and I wonder if it might be useful to make sure that we endeavor to have somebody as in attendance or as a liaison to that council infrastructure committee, because they're dealing with some important issues that came out of IBRIC but also intersect the Planning Commission effort. So I attended the last meeting of the infrastructure committee. I found it very interesting, particularly with respect to their understanding of applying infrastructure needs with potential funding sources and the feasibility of achieving funding through different mechanisms, whether it was a Melrose district for parking facilities, a potential bond measure, or certificates of participation for public safety building, what have you, and various potential ballot measures that might go to the public in the future. So that committee is still very active, and to the extent that we can support that with a liaison or just simply be an interested observer, I think that would be meaningful. And lastly, the parking subcommittee is a new effort comprised of Commissioners Pinelli and Vice Chair Keller. And I would be very interested if this august body would consider coming back to us at a subsequent meeting with some statement of what you would be hoping to do. Not necessarily tonight, but think about exactly, in particular because it's almost a cliche in Palo Alto that the two biggest issues are parking and traffic. So I think that this comes up as part of almost every matter that we have on our agenda, including the possibility of a planned community zone. Are they adequately parked? What's going on with the neighborhoods, the downtown. So I think that the opportunity is very significant for us to do something that would be quite positive. But I'm not clear this has been articulated yet. With that, let me just leave open for anybody who is currently on serving on any one of these committees who would like to give an update. Vice Chair Keller.
Yeah, I'd just like to point out that according to the statute, and the city statute, which is an initiative statute from 1962 that essentially established the role of the Planning Commission based on state law that was from the 50s, essentially that promulgates two specific roles, not exclusive, that's not all that we do, but two specific roles are established in that statute, and which is done by initiative. One role is that we are the authors of, and we adopt and recommend adoption to the council of the comp plan. And actually, it's not mentioned as the comp plan, it's called the Comprehensive General Plan in there. The second thing that we are the keeper of, and also elsewhere it was referred to as in that ordinance is actually referred to as the general plan, and it's also referred to as something else. I don't remember exactly what it said, but it uses a different language each time. The second thing that says that we are responsible for is considering the capital improvement program for consistency with the comp plan or comprehensive general plan. So it's clearly comp plan is the biggest thing that we do, and it comes up in two ways: being the keeper of it, and also being the consistency with capital improvement program. So I think that sort of should guide us in some ways in terms of our role. There's also something in there that's kind of interesting that I never noticed before, and that is there's something in there to the extent that we're supposed to annually review the comp plan for any changes that might make sense to do. And we have not been doing that. Now, we've been going through this intense process for the last few years of doing that. But in some sense, that might be an opportunity for thinking a little proactively as we review the comp plan and think in the future and think about what future changes might need to happen to it.
So I'm very much looking forward to holding a retreat at some point in the next few months, perhaps maybe even after the new planning director arrives, and we have sort of a complete interaction with the commission and the full staff. And I do think it would be useful, over and above having a retreat, having an agendized discussion of our priorities just in a regular meeting. So there's no reason to have to wait to go off-site or hold off understanding why we're here and what's important. But with that, any other comments that we have? At our next meeting on the 25th, in addition to our business matters, there will be a potluck. And so please stay tuned for any logistical announcements from Robin Elner. So motion to adjourn? Second? Anybody opposed? Okay, all in favor, meeting adjourned at 8:44. Thanks.